Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are looking at the new expansion Journey to Unguru that is now available to see in Hearthstone. So, to look at it, you need to go to crafting mode and then click here and click Unguru, and that shows you the cards. Last time we looked at the priest cards, this time we're going to look at the rogue cards that are new. So, going forward, the first card we have is a 1 mana spell called Hallucination. Discover a card from your opponent's class. So, as far as discover cards, this is probably a pretty bad one even at that. I don't generally think people like the discover mechanic that much because it's random. Pros are definitely not going to like it because it's random. And then it becomes even more random in this case because it's now picking a random card from a random class because you never really know what your opponent's going to play. So you're just, for 1 mana, it's not expensive, but it could be any random card at all. Almost any card in the game, potentially. Yeah, I think any card in the game except for a neutral card is what you're going to get. And sometimes neutral cards are much better. So I wouldn't probably waste the space to have that card in the deck. Next card we have is a 1 mana legendary spell, so I know it's the quest, called the Caverns Below. Quest, play 4 minions with the same name. Reward is a crystal core. So I don't know what crystal core is, but if it just means you're going to get another mana crystal, this is actually a very low reward for playing 4 minions with the same name. And how are you going to play 4 minions with the same name when you can only have 2 cards in your deck? You're going to have to return to your hand in a rogue deck a card like twice, or somehow get extra copies of it in a rogue deck, and I haven't up to this point seen any way of doing that, so they must throw something in here that does that. We'll probably find out here. Let's see, next card we have is a 2 mana 1 attack 1 health creature called the Biteweed combo. Gain +1/+1 for each other card you've played this turn. So the combo system up to this point has been specifically only for rogue. There have never been any combo cards that I can think of for any other character, and it seems like that's still going to be the case. Now, Biteweed on the second turn would only be a 1/1 because you couldn't get a combo unless you could play something for 0. And maybe you could play something for 0 a few times. In theory, if you could have enough 0 mana spells or things in your deck, you might be able to, on the second turn, play 6 or 7 cards that cost 0, and then play this and have this become an 8/8 on the second turn. But that's highly, highly unlikely. It would require stacking your entire deck with just 0 mana cards that I don't believe there are 6 or 7 0 mana cards that you could get into a rogue deck. But more realistically, you would play this on the third turn, or you'd play it on the second turn with the coin. So you play the coin, that gets it to a 2/2, and then you play another 1 mana thing, and that gets it to a 3/3. So on the second turn, then you have a 3/3 creature, which isn't terrible as long as you can get that combo going. If you're playing the second turn and you don't have a coin, though, it becomes a little bit worse. I'm not sure you probably would want this card because I bet you could just find something better if you have enough cards. Inherently, the problem with Hearthstone is the new players are getting a worse and worse deal every time there's a new expansion because they're going to have no cards at all, and they're going to be playing against people who have a lot of cards. And I'm somewhere in the middle where I have a decent amount of cards, but probably not the most amount of skill. But even at that, if somebody just started tomorrow, they're going to either have to put a lot of money into buying packs or a lot of effort into earning gold to purchasing packs. And I just don't think that this far in they're going to catch up. And so I don't know how you solve that problem unless you just have this growing starter pack for new players always. Which wouldn't be a terrible idea if Blizzard just says, new players, if you make a new account on Blizzard, formerly known as Battle.net, on Hearthstone, and you've never played before, we're just going to give you a growing number of packs. So new players get like 100 card packs and all the classic cards and all the standard cards, and they can just start and get going. That wouldn't be too terrible. If they wanted to hide that behind $10, $20 of actual money, I wouldn't be upset too much with that. As long as it doesn't so unfairly advantage new players that old players feel gypped, which they probably wouldn't, because it's probably just going to be cards that the old players have. That wouldn't be too terrible, but that's not what we're doing here. And so I'm supposed to be looking at cards. This one was a 2 mana, 2 attack, 2 health card that called the Razor Petal Lasher. It has a battle cry, add a razor petal to your hand that deals 1 damage. So for the second turn you play this and you get a 2/2 versus this card where you play this without the combo effect and you get a 1/1. So this is already better. And then you also get a razor petal to your hand that deals 1 damage, which could be a 1 mana spell or a 0 mana spell. I doubt it's a 0 mana spell though, or even maybe a 2 mana spell to do 1 damage. I doubt it would be more than that. So just in general, I think I'd play this. Also, you have a potential synergy here that says potentially there will be several cards called Razor Petals, and they might decide to synergize on that. We haven't seen the Blizzard do a lot of that in the expansion so far, but it is interesting that it's a potential thing. And see, we see that synergy is continuing here in this 2 mana spell card. So this is Razor Petal Volley. Add 2 Razor Petals to your hand that do 1 damage. And see, the fact that this costs 2 mana and it's just going to add 2 Razor Petals to your hand, I feel like in that case the Razor Petals must be 0 mana spells. Otherwise this card's not going to be worth playing. If they're 1 mana spells, then you would have to play this on the 4th turn to do 2 damage, which seems rather unfair. And the quest here is play 4 minions that are the same name, and unless they include every Razor Petal as the same name, and they're very, very generous in the description there, I don't think so. Like, I still don't see how we're going to do that quest. Moving on, the next spell we have is a 3 mana spell called Envenom Weapon, which is interesting. So here we have a card that gives your weapon poisonous, and the thing about this that should be pointed out, and people get it wrong all the time in just common vernacular, poisonous things are things that you eat and get poisoned on. So a snake is not poisonous unless you're going to eat a snake and it poisons you. A snake is venomous. So for a weapon, it should be gives your weapon venom. But whatever, the game has already established that poison is a thing. It's been here since the beginning of the game. And so they can't really fix that now, or they could, but it would be definitely a teaching moment. So if you don't know what poison does, you know, it's anytime anything is touched with poison, it dies immediately. So if you used your rogue ability that gives you, I believe, a 1/2 weapon, 1 damage, 2 durability. If you use that on the 5th turn and get the weapon, and then you would have 3 mana that could play this to give it poison, and then you could attack on that same turn and kill, say, as high as a 12/12 with taunt, or higher, if there is a creature with more than 12 health. And just doing that 1 damage with poison kills it immediately. So potentially very helpful, particularly if you're trying to make a weapons deck, because there is a quest to play like 5 or 10 weapons, daily quest. And so if you're just trying to win with weapons and have a deck that focuses around having weapons, the rogue is probably a good choice, since they have the most weapons, and giving a weapon poison certainly is useful. There is a weapon that I believe the warrior can have, and only the warrior can have, that allows you to attack multiple times. And if you could steal that weapon card somehow, so steal a card from your opponent's class if you were playing against the warrior, and then play that weapon and give it poison, you could potentially kill all 7 creatures on the opposing side, if there were 7 creatures on the opposing side. But you would have to do it by taking a massive amount of damage to your character, and it's unlikely that would ever happen. But on its own, giving your weapon poison isn't terrible. Next card we have is a 3 mana spell called the Mimic Pod. Draw a card and add a copy of it to your hand. So for 3 mana you draw an extra card, which is a little expensive, and then you get 2 copies of that card. You get the one you drew and then a new copy of it. Well, this card in particular definitely centers around how good your deck is otherwise. If you have great cards in your deck, cards that have very high value, and you just couldn't find 2 other great cards or 1 other great card to have in that stack of 30 great cards, or 28 great cards, or 29 great cards, putting this in your deck makes a lot of sense. But you are taking for granted the fact that if you just had 30 great cards in your deck, you wouldn't want to take up one of those spots for this card, or 2 copies of this card, because this is actually taking up a limited amount of space. So if you really have a great deck, you wouldn't play this card. If you sort of have a great deck, you might play this card to get 2 of the same cards. If you have a very specific strategy that you might have this card, but it would almost never work. Like if you were specifically looking for Kel'Thuzad or other legendary cards. If you were just playing all legendary cards, which you can only have 1 copy of, playing this makes sense. Then, I guess, if you were just playing a straight legendary card. Now, if you have bad cards, this card is actually totally useless. And if you have 30 great cards that are all legendaries, it might also be kind of useless. There's kind of a very narrow window in which this card is useful. But it does exist there. And you could do something kind of amazing with it. But it's a narrow window. I think long and hard before I played that card. Because it does cost 3 minions. 3 mana to get that copy, which is not for free. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 3 attack, 3 durability weapon called the Obsidian Shard. It costs 1 less for each card you've played from another class. Interesting. So, if you were doing a weapon deck, this probably still wouldn't be the best weapon to pick. There's better out there. But if you were doing a card steal deck, if you were just being crazy and stealing cards, which the rogue has the most number of spells and characters that will steal cards from your opponent, maybe you would play this. But even if you were able to, by the fourth turn or the third turn, steal enough cards to make this 0, it's still not the most amazing weapon at 3 attack and 3 durability. I would almost prefer a version of this where it was 10 mana or higher, and it did like 30 damage and 1 attack. I'd prefer to see something like that. So then you had this long running thing. You would draw this on the first turn and then just have it in your hand, and throughout the entire strategy of the entire game you would be stealing cards towards this goal that your opponent would probably never see coming. That would be an amazing twist. But just as it is, you know, you steal 1 card, you get it down to a 3 mana for 3 attack, 3 duration, so it's slightly below the curve. Until you steal a card, you have to pay some amount of mana, at least 1 mana, to steal that 1 card. So by doing that, it's still below the curve. If there's a 1 mana spell that steals 2 cards, maybe then it gets on the curve or below the curve, but you'd have to play that twice. Yeah, I seriously don't think you'd ever want to play this weapon. They're trying really, really hard to, and it's cards that you've played from another class. Yeah, this card is actually awful, come to think of it, because not only do you have to play something like this that's 1 mana to get the card, then you have to play the card. So yeah, this is a really, really bad weapon, and it doesn't play into the quest at all. If the quest was play 4 cards or 5 cards or 6 cards from a different class than rogue, that would make sense for this card to exist or this card to exist. But on there, as it is, both of those cards are pretty bad. So the rogue feels like it's getting a little shortchanged here. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 5 attack, 3 health legendary creature called the Sherazin Corpse Flower. I probably mispronounced that. Death Rattle, go dormant. Play 4 cards in a turn to revive this minion. So what's interesting here is this is a new phrase, and it's not bolded out here. So there's now this new concept called dormancy, or yeah, well, I'll call it dormancy. It's called dormant, and you play this on your 4th turn. That's pretty good for a 5 attack, 3 health. And let's say it gets killed the next turn. Then on your 5th turn, to bring it back, because it would still be on the field, it would just be kind of in something like stealth, but a stealth that could not take damage at all, I assume. So it's just going to be on the field, probably taking up a spot. An interesting question on the concept of dormancy is, if this is dormant in the field and I have 6 other characters, can I play a 7th character and bump him off the field, or is he taking up a spot? I bet he's going to take up a spot, even though you won't be able to attack with him, and you could potentially really mess yourself up in the gameplay. So that is something to consider there, is that if you had 2 or more of these, which I don't even know how you'd have 2 of them because it's a legendary character, but if you were able to clone them or copy them, you could fill up your spots. But otherwise, you play this on the 4th turn, it gets defeated on your opponent's 4th turn. Then on the 5th turn you have to play 4 cards. So then you would want to have a bunch of like 1 mana or 0 mana cards to bring them back. It doesn't seem like that would really happen. And frankly, that probably wouldn't even happen on the 6th turn. Or the 7th turn. Maybe on the 8th turn. So, I don't know if this is really, now that I kind of run it through its paces, I don't know if this is really that good of a card. It heavily centers around this 3 health and can you keep it alive for at least 1 or 2 attacks to the face. Because if you can't, on average, do 10 damage with this before it dies and goes dormant, it's not really worth it, because you're going to have to wait until probably the 8th turn to play 4 2 mana cards, or on average, to bring it back. And then on 8th turn, it's just going to do another 5 damage, and then probably by your opponent's 8th turn, they could do another 3 damage to make it dormant again. And so you're doing a lot of support work here just to keep this 5/3 alive, to potentially get it to do 15 damage. So it's not really a game changer in most scenarios that I can imagine. Finally, we have the 5 mana, 3 attack, 4 health creature called the Velspine Slayer, combo destroy a minion. So you play this on the 6th turn potentially, or maybe you play a 0 mana spell or a coin and play this on the 4th turn, and then it combos to destroy a minion. Not a terrible combo, not too bad. It's pretty expensive at 5 mana though, particularly if you're going to have to play a coin or something else that's 0 mana to get that combo working. But if you're playing this in a combo deck, having a couple of extra combo cards like this isn't terrible. The attack's low, though, and the health's low, but not too bad. So the real weirdness about this, though, is 4 minions with the same name. Like, I really don't know how you would pull that off. And Razor Petal has 2 Razor Petal things, and that's kind of it. If we look at the rogue in total, how could we... Let's see, you could Shadow Step to return a minion to your hand, and maybe that would work on the quest. So if you played something like this and then brought it back and it was 2 less, you could play it again. So I guess that would work. Here you have a poison snake that should be a venomous snake. They should really go back and change all of that to venomous. You can use the cut purse, which I enjoy the cut purse quite a bit, because whenever he attacks the hero, he gives you a coin. This Defias Ringleader and the Defias Bandit. I suppose if you played this, you'd get 1 Defias Bandit. If you Shadow Step to bring it back and play it again, you'd get another Defias Bandit. But I don't know if that's summoning the same thing twice, or you just summoning the Defias Ringleader twice. It depends on how that card decides to play. You can use Gang Up, I suppose. Gang Up is going to work one way, that you could shuffle 3 copies of a minion back into your deck. Is there something else? Well, you know what you could do, though, is Jade Golem. Yeah, I imagine the quest works best if you make a Jade Golem deck, because Jade Golems are summoned under the name Jade Golem every time, but they're unique, and they were just introduced. Every time you summon the Jade Golem, it's 1 attack and 1 health more. So the first Jade Golem you summon will probably, unless the card says differently, be a 1/1. The second one will probably, unless the card says differently, a 2/2. And then it goes to 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, 6/6. I recently played a game where they played it up to, I believe, a 12/12 Jade Golem, just by summoning a bunch of them. And so, yeah, I guess that's the best way to get this quest done. Is you've got to play Jade Golem, and then that's going to give you the crystal core, and then that starts to make some sense. At least I now understand what they're doing there. I really didn't even get it there. Anyways, that was the rogue, so next time we'll look at the shaman cards. If you're watching live, stay tuned. As for everybody else, as I always say, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on basically any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Remember, stay tuned if you're watching live. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.